In a remote place where you might not expect to hear violins, people aren't only playing and learning to play them, they're making them the way they have been for more than a century. This is taking place in the Bolivian Amazon. The AFP news agency says that Franciscan missionaries who came here in the 1800s would play violins in church. Some Bolivians learned how they were made, became luthiers or makers of these stringed instruments, and the craft has been passed down through the generations. One man whose grandfather and father built violins says the work is done with patience so the sound comes out well. While some of the luthiers themselves don't actually have a violin of their own, a student says the dream is to be able to make these instruments for themselves and their relatives. Hi, I'm Carl Azuz for The World from A to Z. Last night, while we produced this show, an emergency search was taking place for the leader of Iran. The nation's president, Ebrahim Raisi, was on a helicopter that disappeared Sunday while returning from a planned event at the nation's northwest border with Azerbaijan. Several Iranian officials were on board with the president, elite military troops, the Iranian army, police, medical officials, and mountain climbers had been dispatched to the area where the chopper went down. That had happened in a mountainous area, and complicating efforts to find the vehicle were cold temperatures, fog, and rain. President Raisi is a Muslim cleric who's been characterized as an ultra-conservative. He's the second most powerful person in Iran's theocratic government, and he's in line to take over the top position, the role of supreme leader. If President Raisi was killed in the crash, Iran's vice president will assume the presidency. But again, so much was unknown last night about the incident itself. USA Today News reported that several countries in the region, including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, had offered to assist with the search. This report was filed after night fell on Iran.
The concern is that there has been no visible sighting yet of the wreckage or the site, according to official sources in Iran. It's not clear at all to the authorities precisely what happened. Now, the president had been right up there in the northwest of Iran attending a ceremony for opening a dam project that actually spanned the border with Azerbaijan just to the north. A big deal. The president of Azerbaijan was there. Iran's foreign minister, as well as many other dignitaries, were on the Iranian president's helicopter when it crashed. It was initially described as a hard landing and then as a crash. But the problem for the search and rescue operation right now is the weather conditions are just too bad for them to put helicopters up into. We know that the European Union has turned on its Copernicus emergency monitoring satellite system at the request of the Iranians to help them in their tracking. But at the moment, the real question is, how hard did the helicopter come down? Could people still have survived? Can they continue to survive in those conditions?
On this date in world history. Back in the day, like the 1490s, it took almost a year to sail from Europe around southern Africa and over to India. And the first European explorer to do that arrived in the southwestern Indian port of Calicut on this date in 1498. That explorer was Vasco da Gama. On this date in 1902, Cuba achieved its independence from the United States. The U.S. had helped the island nation overthrow Spanish rule during the Spanish-American War, but America had controlled Cuba for 4 years after that until it became independent. And a pair of aviation firsts took off on this date. In 1927, American aviator Charles Lindbergh departed New York on his way to France. It was to become the first non-stop solo transatlantic flight. And in 1932, Amelia Earhart took off from Newfoundland, Canada, and landed in Ireland the next day. It was the first non-stop solo transatlantic flight by a woman.
Word of knowledge. Which part of the body was named after the Latin term for almond? Abdomen, amygdala, clavicle, iris. Playing a role in emotion and memory, the answer is an almond-shaped part of the brain called the amygdala.
Okay, Everybody pay attention because we're about to discuss zoning out. Health officials say almost everyone does this from time to time, losing focus, letting your mind wander, staring into space. Daydreaming can be a way to relax your brain. It could lead to you failing a test. Brain fog or letting your mind drift can be dangerous if you're driving. For some people, it can be a way to cope if they're going through something highly emotional. So whether zoning out is good or bad can depend on when it happens and what the circumstances are. You'll have to decide for yourself whether this is worthwhile. It's a zoning out competition in South Korea with one banner reading, "Doing nothing has become a sport."
A crowd gathering, media jostling for the best spot to catch sight of a fierce competition among more than 100 people in South Korea recently. They are rivaling each other in Seoul's annual Space Out competition, where contestants have to zone out for 90 minutes without falling asleep or checking their phones. The winner gets determined based on audience votes and competitors' heart rate. This year, more than 4,000 people applied to participate in the competition, the city government says. From an Olympic athlete to bakers, contestants came dressed in clothes that reflect their different professions.
I tried out for the Olympics 5 times and have never taken a proper rest while training for 30 years. I heard this place is where I can clear my mind and rest at least during this time. So I came here thinking, wow, this is what I needed so much.
While we stare at the oven, we see customers outside the window going out after buying bread, while we work in the hot heat. We're so tired and exhausted, so we wanted to relax our mind.
This year marks the 10th anniversary of the competition that was founded by visual artist Up So-young.
The Space Out competition overturns this social convention that spacing out is a waste of time in today's busy society and turns it into a valuable activity. This contest tells you that spacing out is no longer a waste of time, but a time that you really need.
Since its first competition in Seoul in 2014, the contest has expanded internationally, taking places in cities like Beijing and Tokyo. For this year's competition in Seoul, the winning trophy went to a freelance broadcaster, Kwan So-ah, who works multiple jobs.
I think, especially here in Korea, it's such a competitive country where people think that if they do nothing, that they are a little behind. So I think everyone has to have their own pace and sometimes just slow down.
When asked if we could mention North Dakota, I was like, can do, as in can do. The city in the northern part of the Rough Rider state is where Mr. Greenlee's class is watching. Great to see y'all at North Star Public School. Moving south to Argyle, a town in Texas, we arrive at Argyle Middle School, where Mrs. Edwards and Mrs. Neal's classes are watching from the Lone Star State. And all's well in Endwell. That's a community in New York State, home of Mrs. Martin's class at Maine Endwell High School. Let's go, Spartans!
A once-in-a-lifetime occurrence here.
This rambunctious rascal made his Major League Soccer debut Wednesday night at Subaru Park in Chester, Pennsylvania, during a match between the Philadelphia Union and New York City Football Club.
We need to find him a ball because he's moving very well in the center of midfield.
Gameplay was paused for 5 minutes as crew members tried to capture the tricksy trash panda with trash cans.
There's 3 or 4 of people around him and still the raccoon goes on.
The mischief maker, appropriately dubbed Raccoon, lasted 161 seconds on the field, an unofficial raccoon record according to Major League Soccer, before being apprehended.
They got him! They got the raccoon!
The union says he was put in good hands and safely released.
It's amazing they could identify him with his mask on. We don't know who his keeper is, what his own goal was, why he took a shot to run free and clear across the field when he was so obviously offside and off the mark. Amazingly, there was no penalty, even though groundskeepers were needed to assist during a timeout to tackle the challenge of making sure he could go Rocky no farther in avoiding the trap. I'm Carl Azuz, and we hope you got a kick out of today's show. You saw that one coming. Means the world to have you watching the world from A to Z.